Hi everyone, welcome back to the Oak Island Research Channel for a new episode today. Episode which was broadcasted in French 4 days ago and pretty successful video. I hope you're gonna like it. Just for information, it's gonna last about an hour and a half. That's gonna be a long video. We got a lot of things to cover, but I don't think you're gonna be disappointed. It is the first time in my video series that I do a book review, but this book at the same time is so excited, and at the same time it's just disappointing that so much information has been blackened out by Scott and Donald, but there's still information that's very, very interesting for us. Let's go. So I'm on YouTube, and I'm going to use material that I don't own, for which I don't have a copyright, but fair use on YouTube allows me to do this. I just wanted to make it clear I'm not stealing anybody's work. I think I'm going to give you the the invite to buy this book, actually. We'll see at the end if I'm a promoter or not. What is this book about? Oak Island, Knight Templars and the Holy Grail, Secrets of an Underground Project. So this is a book by Don Rue. It's his third book. And the first one, which is called The Scroll of Anteora, have given us some insight about the underground mechanism and what lays underneath Oak Island. And Don Rue is a source of information, a primary source, since he was first-hand involved in the discovery of the what people called Zena Halpern's map, from which Michael and I started our work. So Don Rue is involved, and let's remember, this map shouldn't have been out. It was insider information. It was a mistake. It was a mishap. It was Zena crossing borders and talking to the show, where Don Rue and Scott Wolter did not want that to happen at all. They were very upset. So it gives kind of credibility to this item. So Don Rue now works with Scott Wolter. When you look at the preface of Scroll of Anteora, Don Rue thanks Scott Wolter for kind of teaching him how to write a book. He says to Scott, I never wrote a book before. I don't know how I'm going to organize all Bill Jackson's material. And Scott tells him, just write the chapters and the rest will flow. So they've been acquainted together for quite some years. And now they decide to work together on that wave of new material Don Rue received recently, and that's what we're going to talk about. The book talks about 3 sources of information, all coming from Bill Jackson at the end of the day. One source is what I call Bill Jackson's heritage, which is basically what's in the Scrolls of Anteora, right? So that's what we received from Don Rue first, what I call the Bill Jackson heritage. There's the Sinclair Weemies journals, which you may have never heard of, and some of them are detailed in this book, and we're gonna have a look together at what they reveal about the island. And finally, the Udea source, I'll talk about it later in the video, of course, with 5 encrypted messages from Bill Jackson to Udea. Okay, mysterious enough. Let's have a look at what each of those 3 streams of information bring to the story. So the first is Bill Jackson's heritage. Bill Jackson, enigmatic character, linked with underground organization, maybe the CIA. Only one picture of him, that's this one. When I was looking at it and doing the video in French, I thought his face looked like JFK when he was young, but anyways. Probably co-wrote or participated in this book, In God's Name, where his name shows up at the bottom right here. That's him here, right here, right? But we know very, very little about him, except that Don Rue says he was a close friend of him from his childhood, but Don did not participate in the endeavors or actions or researches Bill Jackson was about. Bill Jackson was working with another group called the Spartan Group. And part of this Spartan Group people, we have according to the book, somebody named John Drake, John Lennon, Dan Spartan, who was kind of the head of the organization as Don introduces his role, and David Ryan. And if you read the Scrolls of Anteora, some of those words are familiar. And what happened, Bill Jackson passed away 20 years ago, and Don received from his spouse, I guess, or his sister, I'm not sure, both maybe, material that consists of the Scroll of Anteora content. And those people from the Spartan organization passed away between 2017 and 2023. And what happened is, in that period, Donru started to receive by postage, by mail, some smart boxes from these people's wives, spouses, widows, family, who have been instructed to send those boxes to Donru in case one of those protagonists would pass away. So Bill Jackson, while he was alive, working with these people, gave them information. And Bill told them, I guess, that's not in the book, that when their last day were to come, they were to send those information in the shape of, I guess he told them, or they decided, or whatever, in the shape of those smart boxes, and all those encrypted message he gave them have to be sent to Donru eventually. So Donru comes here at the end of the chain. And for instance, this wooden box were actually hollow, and there were some messages hidden inside. You remember the map discovery. It was Bill Jackson supposedly hid it by gluing together the last 2 pages of a book and making it a hiding place for a document like a postcard. Here we go again with these smart boxes. And this one is what Don calls the fish box. When you open it, you have all those little boxes full of other mechanisms, smart mechanisms in it that would reveal cryptid messages. So according to the book, those 4 people, after their death, they didn't send it, but were sent their documents to Donru, and that's part of the Bill Jackson's heritage. What are they made of? What is this information? According to the book, John Drake sent with one of those smart boxes to Donru cryptid messages talking about the description of the treasure. John Lennon sent information about the treasure of Campbell Island, for which I have not investigated yet. I don't know where Campbell Island is. I don't know if this treasure has been retrieved already. I don't know. I'm still on Oak Island at the moment. Dan Spartan sent him map number 8 that we're going to see together in a couple of slides. And Dave Ryan sent him 2 things we already know about. The formula with the note Jim McInnes to Bill Jackson 1 of 7 at the bottom left, and the Mary's note talking about that poem from Paul Valery at the bottom. That's from David Ryan, already mentioned in the Scrolls of Anteora. It's of course coming from Bill Jackson. And what I found so peculiar about the formula is that there's 2 versions. It seems Jim McInnes, because of the testimony of his sister Joanne, had that formula document by his ancestors. And according to this little mark, it seems he gave it to Bill Jackson, and one of the 2 or somebody else added the Mary's note at the bottom. But you can't say the formula is a fabrication of Bill Jackson, since the formula has been present in another shape, in a more original form, with McInnes family for decade, if not centuries, right? So the formula sounds correct. I mean, sounds genuine somehow. David Ryan also provided us with the 7 pieces of the puzzle depicting the tunnels and the mechanism under Oak Island. So that comes from David Ryan. So this is what I was talking about. La Formule with the little note at the bottom and the underground mechanism. That was coming from David Ryan, who passed away between 2017 and 2023. 23 being when the book was, or 24, this book was published. Okay, so, all right, I already wrote this before. Now, second character to appear in the Bill Jackson's Heritage is John Drake. And he gives with coded message, and those coded message don't have any punctuation, no comma to separate a block of words to structure the sentences. We don't have that. So sometimes it can be interpreted several ways. Now, I didn't want to scan the text by respect for Scott Wolter and Don Roux. So what I did on the French video, I was reading the text, typing in French the translation, and what you got here is not the original text, it's the translated back to English version. Of course, it's the same words. We're talking about my master, it's my master in the book, but some words might be slightly different from what's in the book because of that double translation process. So, description of the treasure. My master, the engraver François de Pouilly, with the collaboration of Claude de François, known as Brother Luc, gave Marguerite Bourgeois for the chapel of Notre-Dame du Bon Secours the map on the front of this letter. All right, so we got three people involved. An engraver who's working side by side with Claude de François, we're going to see is a painter, known as Brother Luc. Why Brother Luc? I'm not sure I'm going to explain everything in there, but you can find in Wikipedia. We're going to see that next slide. And they gave, so the person who's talking there is the servant or a worker for François de Pouilly, because he calls him my master. And he gives to Marguerite, on behalf of François de Pouilly and Claude de François, he gives to Marguerite Bourgeois from a chapel a map in front of the letter. And we don't have the map, but we got the letter. So what does the letter say? The letter explains the use of the treasure brought by the descendant of the Knight Templar in 1422 and is composed of three parts. 1422 is what is decoded and decrypted, but that's not when the story started. We're going to see later in other documents, which kind of make me think there have been several deposits over a period of probably 100 years. But for this deposit, that's what they're talking about, the 1422 deposit. They're talking about jewelry, a silver tray with and a Madonna with a dark smile, and gold bars of 50 pounds each, but we don't know how many. And if you're on the Templar Trail, you don't expect a Madonna with a dark smile. You would expect St. John Baptist's skull, or you would expect something even more incredible. But this sounds, sorry to say, a cheesy treasure, like a cheap treasure. But again, I think because the date 1422, we're going to see later, there must have been a bigger treasure brought earlier, and this is just an add-up. That's my hypothesis, if all this is true, what we're reading. Let's carry on. So what has become to this treasure? These three parts. A part has been introduced into the dragon's eye. Wow. A part in the lake 12 feet from the south shore and is salvageable through a 6-foot chain. And the last part was initially hidden under a black stone hidden behind the dragon, but was moved to Halifax in 1749 to help build the fortification. These funds came from rain. Okay, let's analyze this. Three parts. One part in the dragon's eye. If we're talking about Oak Island here, could be another island, but if we're talking about an Oak Island, what is the dragon eye? Is it the money pit? Is it the eye of the swamp? I don't know. There's a part in the lake. There's no lake, it's a swamp, but you could almost substitute one from the other. 12 feet from the south shore, that's not very far away, huh? And is salvageable through a 6-foot chain we should have recovered or found in the show and all the digging they did. Maybe it's not the right island. Maybe it's another island they're talking about that in 1422 the Templars came and put all this there. Or it was already recovered by somebody else. That's why we don't see it now. I don't know. And the last part, initially hidden under a black stone hidden behind the dragon. And again, hidden behind the dragon, what is the dragon? But it was moved to Halifax, etc. And the last sentence caught immediately my attention. These funds came from Rhine. So when they decoded this, they couldn't really get the spelling right or something. They mentioned that they're not sure about the Rhine. I immediately thought about Rennes-le-Château, Rennes, which is misspelled here, would be R-E-I. Actually, you're missing an E. If you get the E at the end, you get Rennes, like Rennes-le-Château, Queen, Rennes. It's not spelled like this, but it sounds like this. So is it the story about the treasure from Rennes-le-Château, which seems to come from the Alaric's plundering Rome in the year 400 something? And Rennes-le-Château was the capital of the Visigoth people, 20,000 inhabitants at the time, and a lot of empty cavities in the mountain around and a lot of streams and etc. Supposedly some money got found and was used for the Versailles project, and some money was retrieved by the Templars back in the days, which is the story of Rennes-le-Château, of course. Interesting, isn't it? All right. That's the kind of cryptid documents they receive in those boxes. So as you can see, there's no punctuation, there's no spaces, so you got to make the best of what, and there are errors in it, and there are keywords repeating, so it took them a lot of time, which I believe it took them a lot of time. It's just a substitution alphabet, but there's a lot of characters in there. So let's see those guys that we're talking. They mentioned 3 people, and I checked. Did they really exist, those 3 people? Are they contemporary? Could they know each other? And what was their story about? And very interesting story. François de Pouilly here was a graver. Engraving. Yeah, the engraving is his work. Famous one. Rich guy. And that's the kind of engraving he would either create, or he was also a publisher of engraving concepts and plates for other engravers. And that's the type of engraving he would sponsor and publish, approve. He did not, I don't know the word, engrave them, but he sponsors them. And that's very interesting. Those, what I found in that book, his creation, his sponsored creation, if you wish, about fountains. There's something about fountains everywhere. And I don't know if we got the same eye. You know, I got a pareidolic eye where I can see things that don't exist, it seems. But this fountain here stroked me, especially when you mirror it and return it. It does look like Oak Island for me, in my eyes at least. And even more peculiar, you seem to have a shore here, and you seem to have water streams that go out or in the island, and another piece of, is that the sea there? I don't know. It's just, I haven't spent too much time on it yet, but it's kind of, it's like the pictures that intrigue me and that I like to look, with is there a second message in there? Why do we have a pool at the bottom here? I'll let you browse those pictures and think about it. The second person we're being talked about is Claude François. There's a famous singer in France, contemporary from the 20th century, named Claude François. But that's not him. That's another one, and I'll give you the opportunity to read or find the Wikipedia page about him. I haven't paid attention to his paintings yet. I haven't investigated them, but this person exists, and it's the same years, 1614 to 1685, and we're here at 1623 to 1693, so compatible. They may have met each other. I need to investigate more. This is just the first findings. The last person we're talked to is Marguerite Bourgeois, and wow, surprising, many things came from her. She was French, but she migrated to Montreal, and she founded the congregation of Notre Dame of Montreal, which is a peculiar church, not church, this is a basilica or cathedral, because of the painting of Mary Magdalene with Jesus, with a maple tree leaf, and the colors are not Catholic. That's what the interpretation is about. Anyways, the picture at the bottom is not the cathedral, it's the church of the Bon Secours. And as you can see, we got boats hanging. So I thought I found something very peculiar or unique in that church in France on my last video, but I was stood corrected by a lot of my viewers saying this happens frequently, especially when you get an ocean or seas nearby. So there we are. But that's the church she founded, this place. This is the original structure she founded. And she migrated. Excuse my French, but migrating from Europe to the Americas and Canada in 1650, you must have balls, even if you're a woman. Excuse me, but this is quite an endeavor. So very interesting. So the message is from the engraver and the painter to be given to this lady. We don't know if she's already in Canada, if she's still in France, but that's interesting. She was told about the secret, if you wish, somehow. Let's close this first page and carry on with Bill Jackson's heritage and Dan Spartan, who was kind of the head of the organization. And his wife had instruction to send some material to Don Roux, including this material. And this map is interesting. This is Mahone Bay here, right? And you got numbers there. It's written in French. It's map carte 8, map number 8. So you got numbers where you may have deposit. You see depot. Depot is deposit in French. Bondereau. This one I can't read yet. But the one that interests us is this one, Set Enough, 7 and 8. And 7 and 8, Set Enough is this one, pointing at Oak Island. Or Frog Island, actually, but I think it's Oak Island. And here we read, Trésor de dépôt 1395, supprimé même 1769, which translates into Treasury deposited in 1395, deleted even 1769. There's something wrong in French here. You don't supprime a trésor. Supprime means to delete. You don't delete a treasure. You retrieve it, you remove it, but you don't delete it. And même means same, identical. And this sentence doesn't mean much in French. Trésor de dépôt, treasure of depot in 1395, and deleted, even deleted equivalent. That word here, it shouldn't be there. You don't need that word to get the same meaning. So I don't know why it's there. But what they tend to say here is that if this is Oak Island, and if all this is true, and I don't know, the treasure was deposited in 1395 and was removed in 1769. Now, allegedly, the McKinney's gang, the kids, and they were not kids we know now, the discovery is 1795. And by the way, this corresponds to the Rochefoucauld Grail era. I know a lot of people don't follow me on the Rochefoucauld Grail approach, but I'm strongly attached to this, and I strongly believe it's what it is. And I'm not going to spoil a little bit, but Michael's got a video for you coming up. We talked about it last night, and if you don't believe the Rochefoucauld people are involved in that story, then I think you need to reread and review all those videos. Anyways, that's interesting and disappointing at the same time, isn't it? If all this is true, there's no more treasure under Oak Island. The only treasure is the remaining of the machinery and the construction and the tunnels and the vault, which is sufficient for me. I'm not looking for a treasure, I'm looking for history. But I did that video in French, and some people were like, okay, so it's the end. Well, it's not. We're going to see why it's not. It continues, because if it got removed, it means it's somewhere else. That's our new quest, if you wish. Okay, so that's what Dan Spartan is bringing to the situation. The supposedly information that the treasure, we now have a date. I'm not very satisfied with the content we saw earlier, but at least we got a date in and out. Okay, the Journal of Earl Henry Sinclair. That's the second stream of sources of document described in this book. The Sinclair Wamy's Journal. What is it? It's 20 manuscripts discovered by Diana Muir, I hope I pronounced right, at the Mormon Temple of Nauvoo, Illinois. Diana Muir has got a sulfurous, I don't know if that's English, reputation because she was convinced with forgery 20 years ago or 30 years ago. She pretends she's a researcher, archaeologist, you name it, but she was caught red-handed with falsification of document. So even Scott Wolter in the book says, I must have all those warning signals on when dealing with that material. But he went, there's a picture of him, he went to that Mormon temple and he saw the manuscripts for his own. So those manuscripts do seem to exist according to Scott Wolter. And what are those 20, that's big, manuscript described? They're talking about the covenant over 13 generations that are on a secret mission. Wow, let's have a look. Those manuscripts go from 1353. Let's have a look at the date again when the treasure, 1395, this map says. 1422, the content one says at the first letter we discovered. But the manuscripts starts in 1353 in Latin, 13 manuscripts in Latin. And they go all the way to 1770, going from Old English to Modern English. So we got 20 manuscripts covering 13 generations, journals, like diaries, about what happened. And what do they say? Well, that's what they explain, and I'm really summarizing and condensing because I can't just share the book. Of course, you have to go and buy it if you want to know more. But after 1307, when the Templar movement was declared illegal by Philippe le Bel in France, a couple of years later, Bruce was fighting for the independence of Scotland in front of the English army and king. And the legend says that at the Battle of Bannockburn, some unexpected reinforcement of we don't know where they came from of knights came and gave a spanking to the British, to the English. It seems the Templars, or some of them, fled to Scotland because Roos was declared heretic from the Pope. Therefore, the Pope could not put any pressure and his laws didn't have any impact in Scotland if Roos was to be victorious and get his independence and become an heretic. So that's probably why they went there. In return for the winning the independence of Scotland, that's what the book says, not me. The Scottish gave protections to the Knight Templars and to the Knight Templars treasure, which was brought to Scotland, probably from La Rochelle. But again, that's for Michael, for his video. Michael, I know you're going to watch this and you're going to hate me for saying this because I'm spoiling. Anyways, so on the 25th of May, 1395, there's a departure for the New World with 120 descendants of Knight Templars. That's one of the information the book gives. Now, Wimy is about John Wimy, or Weem. And the Wimy journal, the one that we can read or is proposed in the book out of the 20 manuscripts, is about John Jr., let's call him this way, who, when about 19 to 22 years old, I can remember, is called upon for a discussion by his father. And this is where his father reveals him that he's now at the right age to start his own journal about the story of what happened on Oak Island. Because those people, those clans and those generations were the guardians and were the descendant of the original treasure layer underneath Oak Island and the people who constructed it. And for 13 generations, some of them went back to make sure everything was in place, but they were to keep an eye on that island, and they were the only one to know what happened there. So from the book, there's that sentence, "Father has arranged for us to leave tomorrow on a ship for Cape Breton in Canada, where we will join other members of the Alliance." So there's an alliance. "My uncle John Scott will accompany me as he did with my father years ago, and he will guide me to that place of hiding," so probably Oak Island, "which father speaks only as the covenant." So that's we don't have that much information in the book, but we know that those 20 manuscripts seems to exist and that there are generations of guardians, even though 5,000 or 3,000 miles away from Scotland, were to have a view, a guarding role over the treasure. And they're probably that alliance and that team and that crew who decided to remove the treasure if it was indeed removed, because there are too many settlers coming in the region. The third source of information we got in this book is the Judea stream. So these are 5 messages from Bill Jackson. And Judea was a very good friend of Bill Jackson, according to the book, and Don Rue, and she died in 2019. And she was a very good friend of Bill Jackson up to a point that she received information from Bill Jackson as form of messages. I don't know what instructions she had to keep them, to send them to, I don't know. But she left a cache of documents to her half-sister Roberta. And Roberta knew somebody that Don Rue knew too. And I don't know, they don't explain how they got in touch, but basically Roberta contacted with Don Rue saying, "My half-sister died and I've got things that's written must be sent to you, so I'm contacting you." So Roberta died in August 2023, and that's where Don Rue inherited the documents, including 5 messages. So message number 1 is this. Tons of information in there, you're going to see. "The power of God is with you." This is the final version of the report. The first version dates from 1308. That's the first version of the report, 1308. It was revised 3 times until the present one in 1908. So what we're reading here is a revision of the original version, and that revision happened in 1908. If you remember my last video about CLY, on John Stammer's show, that spelling, writing style that's very much matching the Zina Halpern's writing style. And we know from somebody, a viewer of John's channel and his email, his name is Ron, that CLI wrote the War of the Book of the Lords by hand, or some passages, in 1908. That's interesting. Let's go to the content of the message now. In 1304, Louis de Grimoire, by order of the Grand Master Jacques de Molay, who indeed was Grand Master of the Templar Order in 1309, 3 years before its downfall. Louis de Grimoire chartered 3 ships from La Rochelle to the island of Man, with Francisco de Leon as pilot, the navigator. Then they reached the island of West Harris to embark the designer, architect, Paulette Justinian Roach, and departure on March 21st for the northern lands, Iceland and Greenland. That's me adding Iceland and Greenland. They just say about the northern lands. This is the journal of the expedition, consecrating the 300 years old project to protect the relic currently held by Lionel de Waldern, the third of the name, age 44, embarked on the Gaspard. That's the name of the ship. The Gaspard also carried Philippe Darmon, captain, and a crew of 56, as well as the chest of jewels accompanying the relic. The Guardian, second ship, real name Lo Tutoro. So it's a ship from Genoa. Italy didn't exist at the time, but that's Genoan. Had a crew of 74 men, carried 3 chests of silver and gold ingot. Also had on board Ibrahim Muhammad al-Zakara, creator of the structure. We're gonna reread this together in a second. Finally, the third ship, the Valiant, and its captain Juan de Alvarez of Guarda, Portugal, with a crew of 68 on board, 5 chests of silver and gold coins. He also took on board the cartographer Sotomon Izarbo, son of Licinius. They arrived at the observatory on June 21st and left on July 21st for the lands of the Wasuta and Micmac. Wow! So much to say. Okay, let's start from the beginning. In 1304, Louis de Grimoire. So I checked, did Louis de Grimoire exist? I think it's on the next slide. No, it's coming later. So I checked, he exists. Not Louis, but the Grimoire. I couldn't find a Louis, but I found his brother or his cousin. And you wouldn't believe who it is, really. We're going to see that in 2 slides. So they charter, and he must have money, influence person, to charter 3 ships in 1304. You need to have some money on the bank account, even though banks didn't exist. Chartered 3 ships from La Rochelle, Templar port, to the island of Man, between Ireland and England, with Francisco de Leon as pilot. They reached the island of West Aries to embark the designer. Designer of what? An architect for what? Well, I think it's for the underground system. Paulette Justinian Roche. Now, in the Scroll of Anteora, Donru introduces us to Mr. Roche, indeed. It could be a descendant of this Paulette Justinian Roche, who kept and who had in his heritage multiple from generation to generations, like the McInnes or like anybody else, some family document. Departure for the Northern Lands. Now, second part. This is the journal of the expedition consecrating 300-year-old project to protect the relic. It's a relic. There's a relic indeed. Is it the Madonna with the smile? Is it something else? Currently held by Lionel de Walden. We see this name already in Scrolls of Anteora. The third of the name, age 44. So now we know it's in 1304 they embarked. He was 44, so he was born in 1260. So we can find which Lionel de Walden it was. They embarked on the Gaspard. Now there's name on those ships. I asked one of my viewers, ask viewers on my French channel if anybody knew when did humanity started to Christian ships and give them names. It seems since the Phoenicians, so it's possible. The Gaspard also carried Philippe Darmon, captain, crew 56, chest of jewels. The Guardian, ship from Genoa, had on board Ibrahim Muhammad al-Zakara, creator of the structure. So you got an architect and the creator of the structure. Probably the creator of the structure underground. And I didn't pay attention. I looked for those names. The only name that came out was the Grimoire, and I'll show you in a second. Al-Zakara didn't show up on Google when you look at it. But one of my viewers, the French viewers are smart, believe me, they say me this, what's up with Saqqara in Egypt? Saqqara in Egypt is a place where you got lots of pyramids, right? Al-Zakara, the one from Saqqara. So Ibrahim Muhammad from Saqqara, creator of the structure. Interesting, huh? Finally, the Valiant and his captain, which I couldn't find because there's a lot of Juan de Alvarez on the internet. But he had on board the cartographer. Look at the name of the cartographer. Sotomon Izarbo, son of Licinius. Wow, I had a flash there. And I read this book 4 times. It was my 4th time going through that book from Don and Scott before this popped in front of my eyes. Licinius. It's the same Licinius as CLY. Again, my last video and the note that was shown on John Stemmer about the book of the War of the Lord. It is signed Licinius. And now, see, the L, I've got the full name in the video coming later, but in CLY, the L is Licinius. I've got a special page at the end of this video about the authors and those names, and there's more. That's interesting. They arrive at the observatory on June 21st. What's the observatory? Well, there's a map attached. I didn't scan it for you, but definitely the observatory is this. It's the Newport Tower. That's what they call the observatory. And there's a very interesting phrase in this Wikipedia, is that 18th century paintings show that the hill itself once furnished a view of the harbor and would have been visible to passing mariners in Narragansett Bay. But trees' growth now obscure the view, so it was visible from the sea as a point of guidance, if you want, as almost like a lighthouse. But at the same time, it was an observatory because it was determined that those openings in the wall were aligned with astronomical phenomena. Okay, so that's the Newport Tower. I found, but that's in French. I didn't bother translate because it's a very strange site. The URL is, I'm not sure, and I didn't find a lot of information on the internet, but I can find this name here. Where was it? Louis de Grimoire. That's the guy we're talking about. Louis, here written L-U-I-S instead of L-O-U-I-S, but I think it's okay. It's the same. And we find him. So this story in this website is about, after 1307, some Templars went to the island of Mull in Scotland. And in 1313, they decided to carry on the order underground. And these were the first version 2 Templar assembly, if you wish. And one thing very interesting is that, so Louis de Grimoire was part of that crew. And on top of that, Louis de Grimoire, here he is again with a different spelling, but I think it's okay. It's the way they were writing it at the time. His role in the organization, he was in the new organization in Templar V2, was not great commander or nothing. He was keeper of the secrets and the treasures, of the scrolls and the treasures. And he's the one who pays for 3 ships to go to Oak Island. Interesting. But I don't know how good and how reliable this is. This is just finding on the internet. I can't find double proof backup or nothing. But I can find his cousin, or I couldn't find a relationship, but same years, same era. We're right after the Templar downfall. So he was born right after this in 1310. Louis was already alive because in 1313 he was part of an assembly. Maybe his son, I don't know. But Guillaume de Grimoire ended up being Pope Urban V and he didn't want to. It was, I'll let you read. It's funny when I read it. It's like he didn't want to become Pope. He was not supposed to become Pope, but basically didn't have anybody else. So very interesting. So the Pope who teamed up with Philippe le Bel, Clément I think it was, to kick the Templars' butts and imprison them and destroy the order, the Pope right after him is, I think, Urban V. Interesting. It's a small world. Let's carry on with Yudea's messages. So still on message 1. That's the kind of things you get when you buy this book. I mean, Scott and Don may be very upset at me by publishing some of their material, but I think if we go to court someday, the judge is just going to laugh about, yeah, well, he copied a black box. That's what he did. Well, almost. I'll let you read. Second, Roberta. So this is coming from Roberta and Julia. Strange symbol on a crude map of Oak Island with separate drawings. With separate drawings of what appears to be entrances to a subterranean tunnel system. The map also appears to show 3 well entrances, Asmos circles, a forge on the island, a boulder pavement running east-west across the eastern section of the island, and a drainage system into the ocean leading from the easternmost well entrance, otherwise known as the Money Pit. Okay, so 3 well entrance. We're gonna, as small circles, we're gonna revisit this in the next slide. So I'm leaving this on the side for now. A forge. I think something similar to a forge was found by the Oak Island show team some seasons ago. The boulder pavement running east-west across the eastern section. Again, that was found, wasn't it? A drainage system into the ocean leading from the Money Pit. Now that's very interesting. Michael and I have suspected for a long time that Smith Cove is not feeding the Money Pit with water. It's extracting water from something, like a drainage system into the ocean, not from the ocean. Could be in, could be out, but maybe they got arrows of flows written on those maps, and those arrows can help us understanding the flow. And you can see they removed that information. We don't know what this is, but there's something else. We got very little remains of what was originally that picture. I think it was Oak Island. I think that's the something like the shape here. But this is interesting. So I zoomed it out for you. What is this? I can see rods or beams. There's like some kind of beams like this with a circle around. So if it's top view, it could be a top view of the Money Pit, for instance, with the logs. But if it's not top view, if it's front view, that could be the entrance of a mine shaft, horizontal, where you got those reinforcements for holding the structure and that the earth doesn't collapse on you. Could be. Also, it's either number of sign. Is it a K? Is it an N? I don't know, but there's little things to guess around here. I'll let you have guesses about it if you wish. So that was message number 1. So message number 1 was about the 3 ships and the departure from La Rochelle to the Island of Man, picking up people along the way and going with the architect and the designer and the cartographer and all those guys going to Mahone Bay, most likely. Message number 2. So this is what we get for the message number 2. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Scott and Don explain, they did all this, blacking out most of the text so that the Oak Island production show would not get those data, which would help them retrieve a lot of things. Because there's a FUD between Scott and Donald on the one hand and the production about documents that were not supposed to have, like the Zena Halpern's map, and that they never gave back, and they hate them. I think there's really hate. And since they don't want them to have access to the information, well, we don't have access to the information, but I paid my $27 for this book and I don't have access to the information. It's a shame. Anyways, the second of the 5 encrypted message was comprised of a single page with row of number of the box grid system labeled 10 and appeared to be an explanation about the underground workings on the tunnel system on Oak Island. So it's the underground work explained, detailed drawing of the structure, confirmation of the 7 drawing puzzles. That's what they write in the book, but they don't give you any more about message number 2. Message number 3, it's a description on how the treasure was removed from Oak Island in 1769. Let's have a look. In 1769, Captain Timothy McLaren landed on the small island. He saw that it was a large island with a march. So that at the beginning confused me. So he lands on a small island and he sees it's a big island? Doesn't know. It came to me later. I think he landed on where? Where did we always say, where do I claim they landed? It's on Frog Island. So he lands on Frog Island, which is a smaller island. And then he can see from Frog Island that Oak Island was a large island with a march. The march being the swamp. The 6 stones were located and the formula led him 500 feet from the huge oak tree where he installed a ship's pulley on one of the broken braces or the limb just above well number 3, Although the mechanism was old, it still worked, and the rest of the gold and coin was brought to the surface. He forced the mechanism at wheel number 1 into the open position. He realized that the entrance to hell was no longer accessible. He couldn't locate the trapdoor, nor the jewelry box. The box had been destroyed. The beams had begun a process of putrefaction and were not replaced. They were present every 10 feet to a depth of 103 feet. The backfilling was botched because there were inhabitants on the land opposite. After 1 month and 1 week, the ship left the island with its 55-man crew and what was left of the treasure. There's so many information in there. Let's just look at the second part of the message and we get back to this. In 1795, that's the year of the discovery, right? Officially. The British Navy had parts of this document in possession and went to well number 3, recognizing it thanks to the pulley left by McLaren 26 years earlier. They found that well number 1 was no longer working. Of course, he jammed it. He sabotaged it. They were seen from the ground, those British Navy, in front of them, the ground in front of them, so that's continental Nova Scotia, and they had to leave in a hurry. 15 years later, Brother Rochefacould was told that a man named McInnes has built his cabin over the trapdoor. Continuous excavation have destroyed most of the underground and approach constructions. Later, a black man settled on the island. That's our friend Samuel Bowles. His agricultural tools and the movement of many stones destroyed what was left of the project. Sometimes gas bubbles still escape from the swamp with strange noises and light. The locals say that the island is haunted. This was written in 1965 by Talaco II. Wow. Let's rewind. So, 1769, 16 years before the discovery, 26 years before the discovery. Timothy McLaren, we're going to have to chase that guy because he left with the treasure if all that is true and if those messages are correct and reflect reality of what happened. He lands on Frog Island. He sees Oak Island as a very large island with a mash. He finds 6 stones. The 6 stones were located. So he lands on the island and the first thing he checks is the 6 stones he knows about because he's got information about how to retrieve the treasure. I originally thought those 6 stones were Nolan's Cross, which allows you to pretty much draw the full geometry of the site. But there's no 6 stones. There's only 5 boulders. The 6th one was buried, and it's Fred Nolan who dug up and found it 3 feet under the ground, so he didn't see them. The 6 stones, I'm going to show you what they are. They're the drilled hole stones, which locate precisely the oak tree, because when he landed in 1769, there was a bunch of oak trees on this island. The formula led it 500 feet from the huge oak. The formula. Only after my second or third reading, I understood it was our formula. That's the formula we're talking about. The one with the Mary note and everything. Which says, stop, don't dig. Dig at 40 feet with 45-degree angle. At 522 pieds, you've got La Rampe. And at 1065 pieds, through the corridor, you end up in the vault. That's the formula we're talking about. And the formula leads him 500 feet from the huge oak tree where we installed a ship's pulley on one of the broken braces. Now again, there's no punctuation in the encrypted text. This was encrypted again. So here we read, the formula led him 500 feet from the oak tree. Well, that's okay. In English, it's better than in French. You can understand there's only one way, so I don't have to fight with it. So the money pit is well number 3. From their definition, the well numbering. And this is very interesting, the next sentence. If you still think and believe it's just about digging down to 103 feet or whatever, and you'll find something, he says it here. Although the mechanism was old, it still worked, and the rest of the gold and coin was brought to the surface. You have to go to La Rampe and activate this mechanism. You have to go to the surface and to the hole under the trapdoor and the valve and use those mechanisms. And those mechanisms mechanisms. Oh, this mechanism and the others were still working in 1769, and he got the golden coin, and it was brought to the surface. It doesn't say anything about a relic, huh? He forced the mechanism of wheel 1 into the open position. What could it be? Either la rampe, but la rampe is not supposed to be a well. We'll see that in a moment with the picture. It could be the hole under the trapdoor, but it's hard to jam. It's just a hole. So it could be the valve. The valve, you can jam it in an open or closed position. He realized the entrance to hell was no longer accessible. Now, hell is you have to buy the book. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but there's something under the money pit, which is a huge cavity, natural cavity, that they called hell. And you have to buy the book to understand why they call it hell. I'm not going to talk about it now. He could not locate the trapdoor. Which one? Is it the trapdoor of the hole under the trapdoor? There must be a trapdoor above the valve to conceal it. It seems from John Stemmer they may have found a trapdoor in the swamp now, so I'm not sure which trapdoor you're talking about. Not the jewelry box, the box had been destroyed. The beams of the money pit had begun a process of putrefaction and were not replaced. Doesn't care, he's removing the treasure anyways. They were present every 10 feet to a depth of 103 feet, so now we know the construction was going down to 103 feet originally. The backfilling he did was botched because there are inhabitants on the land opposite. That's why probably on the description of the original depositors, there was logs, okay, every 10 feet, sorry. But the field, this is the backfill, was going not perfect. It was not, there was some void. It was not fully compact because probably McLaren didn't have time. After 1 month and 1 week, staying on near the island, the ship left with 55-man crew and what was left of the treasure. So a single ship to retrieve the treasure. In 1795, okay, they see the block and tackle. It's at the money pit on wheel number 3. So wheel number 3 is the money pit. The McLaren left the pulley there. They found that well number 1 was no longer working. Well number 1 was, we still don't know which one it is, either the valve or the hump, but probably the valve, because to reach la hump, which is not a well, you need to go inside the system, and it's not mentioned here. They did. They recognized, but they couldn't operate the valve. The valve seems to be broken in an open position. We'll see what it gives in the picture later. They have to leave in a hurry. 15 years later, brother Rochefoucauld, and again it's strong. It's the second time on the Scroll of Antera we got that error already, but it seems it's the Rochefoucauld, not Rochefoucauld. There's no Rochefoucauld on the internet, at least. There's nobody. I think it's Rochefoucauld. Was told that McInnes built his cabin over the trapdoor, and we know he built this cabin near the McInnes foundation is near the valve, not the hole under the trapdoor. So maybe there's another trapdoor, maybe because Grandpa McInnes, says Joan McInnes, was telling the kids coming on vacation, from her memory, you should go run around the island. Near the house, there's a hatch to be found. Maybe. Excavation have destroyed everything. Later, black men settled on the island. That's Samuel Ball, most probably. And this report is written in 1965 by somebody named Tala Ko2. My gosh, that's another weird and strange name, like the CLY for the map. But again, we're going to see that later together. So the well number 3 is the money pit. The well number 1 is, I'd say, the valve. I changed my mind. And the well number 2 then is what? It's either the hole under the trapdoor or la hump. But la hump is not a well. It doesn't go to the surface. A well connects to the surface. So probably the hole under the trapdoor. Yeah, that's probably what it is. So this is the La Rochefoucauld 15 years later. So 15 years after 1795. So it means 1810. And in 1810, the Rochefoucauld in charge, in place, He was born in 1767 and died in 1841, so that's him. It's this one who's called François. It's a François Rochefoucauld, not a Guy, not a... So, interesting, François Rochefoucauld. It starts to slowly tie up between the Zina Halpern's map, Sept dessins pour François Rochefoucauld, who may have been written by a guy named CLY in 1908, or maybe before. It was for a François, or could be for his son. I don't know. We'll see later. Yeah, I was saying this is the McInnes Foundation, McInnes House, and the valve is located somewhere around here, I think, from what I remember. I think we did a video about this some time ago. I couldn't find it. And I think from what I remember, John Smith built his over or near the money pit. Yeah. Or they're making a mistake and they're talking about John Smith, calling him McInnes. And then when they say he built his house over a trap, maybe it's near the money pit. We don't know. Yeah, so money pit is here, and it could be well number 3. And they say well number 2, we don't know which one it is, but he says he jammed open well number 1. So if this is well number 1 and he jammed it open, so there will be a continue, meaning there will always be water flowing out, meaning that the vault will be in the unlock position. Interesting. I would have closed it, because by closing it, jamming it down, I would have made sure that this was in the upward position. So I don't know. I'm going to have to reinvestigate all this. Let's move on. Yeah, so he's talking about 6 stones. He lands on the island and he retrieved those 6 stones. And to me, it's not Nolan's Cross. There's only 5 visible stones. But there's those stones, the drilled rock. And we know they exist from the Roper survey. And here they are, beautifully mapped by Michael, and some of the rocks we can still see on the picture. And the function of those drilled rocks is sighting, aiming. Let's have a look at Google Earth. But before we go at Google Earth, just a reminder, La Formule is written with foot, meaning Charlemagne's era feet in France. And one of those foot is 0.325 meters. The modern US foot that Google Earth measures and that you guys talk about every day in the US is a different foot from the Charlemagne one, and it's 0.3048. So this is the ratio between the 2 units. And again, those documents, the La Formule and the rest, are using pied, the Charlemagne foot. When we talk in documents in 1700 or 1800 and we talk about feet, we're talking about US feet. With this said, let's have a quick look at Google Earth. So thanks to Michael who shared this with me. This is the money pit area. And in the money pit area, you find those 6 drill rocks, which in 1769 were probably there at the right place. He knew where to find them to locate the right oak tree among all the oak trees that were around. And yeah, those rocks have the particularity to find the tree and the money pit at the same time by crossing those sites, lines of sites. Now what you see here at the bottom, the big circle is probably the tree size, the oak, the old oak. The small red circle is probably the reach of the limb, and the yellow circle is the money pit with the right diameter as per the report from the McGuinness and Smith and Vaughan. So he locate. What does the statement says on the letter? He says the 6 stones were located. All right. So we found now the huge oak tree. He installs the ship pulley, and from there, the formula by digging at 40 feet, 45 degree, taking the little digging on the side of the money pit's cylinder to reach the entrance of the tunnel. But the tunnel in the formula is 522 feet, not 500. So what is it telling us about? So we know it's from La Rampe, according to la formule, to the 522 points, 522 Charlemagne's feet, you'll end up right here, 522. But wherever you dig, you're not going to dig the whole surface. You're going to dig, and you have to add that distance from the center, and that distance in modern feet, because I can only measure modern feet with Google Earth, is, all right, so it's 9.16 feet. So I need to add 9.16 feet to whatever is 522 in modern feet to find the full distance between the center of the money pit and La Rampe. So let's do that quickly. I said my conversion factor was 1.066. So let's go. 522 divided at 0.066. That's 489 modern feet, that distance known as the 522. And I'm going to add my 9.16 feet, and then there at 499 modern feet. And he talks about 500 feet. 500 feet away, 1769 era feet. So that works to the foot. There's 1 foot error. Very interesting. So, yeah, he's just describing which I asked Michael so many times. What would you do if you landed on the island in 1700? And the answer is look for the drilled rock. They're going to give you the oak position, and from there with La Formule, you're going to find La Rampe and start operating La Rampe and working the mechanism out. Interesting. Let's carry on. Message number 4 out of 5. And in the book, that's what you find. That sentence from Scott and Don. The 4th message has nothing to do with Oak Island. Get away from here. Okay, we will never know what it's all about. I doubt it's got nothing to do with Oak Island. I doubt it. But hey, we don't have access to this information. This is message number 5. Oh my gosh, it's hard to read because they removed a lot of things. I'll let you read the right-hand side if you want, but in a nutshell, what you find in message number 5, you find that in shaft number 1 is a natural cavity of soft rock at 140 feet. Oh my gosh, when I read this, I was jumping up my seat. In shaft number 1, there's a natural cavity of soft rock at 140 feet. Let's have a look at this again. This is number 3. This is probably shaft number 2 or well number 2. So this is a shaft. It's a shaft down there. This is probably number 1. And what do they say? They said 140 feet. Let's read again. At 140 feet, shaft number 1 is a natural cavity of soft rock. There's a natural curved cavity at 140 feet, you don't see there, of soft rock. So many people have asked me, you get nice approach, but how do you empty the water? Because it's going to go back to the ocean at the same level. Well, no. If you consider that you do that between 2 tides or at slack time, you're going to benefit from the ocean getting out. But then you don't need a trapdoor. You don't need a flushing system. Well, what they're saying basically is that if I do it differently, at 140 feet underneath, you get a big cavity of soft rock. So if you open that trapdoor, the water you're trying to flush out will not flush into the ocean, will flush into that cavity. Maybe you need to be wary about the tide, otherwise, I don't know how they did it, the flux and reflux. But that kind of solves the problem that we were wondering, where is the water going? Other information in this message number 5. One Indian descends with a torch and causes an explosion, hence the name Hell. But we don't know in which cavity. Probably that one. So they explored it at 140 feet down. The next day there were no more gas. Works begin towards La Rampe. I'm wrong. Work begins towards La Rampe, meaning it's work on the money pit. So the money pit seems to be reinforced by clay, as I think and I kind of explained in one of the videos. So it's with the platforms every 10 feet, and then there's something bigger underneath. There's a huge cavity they call hell that used to have some gas that exploded when they sent somebody down. But once that was stabilized, no more gas, then they started the work towards that hump at 40 feet. At 40 feet, dig, and 522 feet later, you find La Hump. Well, that's when they started working towards La Hump from the money pit. From the pit, they started to dig to La Hump, according to this. The next, they used Chinese bomb to get into the hard rock. We know the west part of the island is hard solid rock. The east part is drumlin. It's easier to dig. So how do you get into hard rock? By using explosives. They didn't have explosives back in the days. Yes, they did. Chinese people did since the year 900. So maybe they got explosive or the formula and the material to create explosives, not TNT bars, of course. And that could explain a lot also. The tunnel joins well number 1 and the cavity. The tunnel joins well number 1 and the cavity. Well number 1 seems to be this one. The cavity is at the very bottom. And the tunnel may be this thing here. I don't know. I think that's what it is. Or maybe they're talking about that one, because I don't know this one's usage. We don't know. Not enough information because everything's blacked out. We finally know that 21 people died during the project, which is very sad. And may God have their soul. Okay, one thing about the authors. Because the more we go into those documents, the more authors pop up. We found in 1965 somebody named Tala Ko II. We find Cliffus Licinius Iserbo, the 17th of the name. C-L-Y. This is the C-L-Y that John Stemmer shows a page written by hand about the book of the War of the Lords, and the handwriting is extremely similar to the one from the Zina Halpern's map. And the War of the Book of the Lord supposedly has been written by hand, that copy by somebody named C.L.Y., a Cliffus Licinius Iserbo. Which number? This is the 17th. We're talking about 13 generation. I don't know what they code their names. Talaco is the second one. And Talaco means something in Micmac, in native North American. I don't know which tribe, but it's in the book. I'm not going to read it here. Yeah, I'm making a copy of what came up on John Stenner's show in March 24. Supposedly written in 1908 by C.L.Y. Not this C.L.Y. one. This one went... Because we got to mention that Salomon Iserbo, the cartographer in 1304, he was the son of Cliffus Licinius 17th. So Salomon Iserbo is the son of Cliffus Licinius. But there's another Cliffus Licinius Iserbo in 1908. But they use the same pseudos, the same avatars, just putting a number behind it. I don't know why, but it starts to be interesting. We have another signature. CLY seems to have signed by the Lionceau de Talmont also, if that's him, the same spelling. Another enigmatic signature. We got from the show, the Oak Island show, because they were looking for that version of the book, something that is signed, I think it's the signature, by FLX157. Who's that one again in that picture? So, interesting. We can see there seems to be some leakage. And again, if all this information is true. But what a hoax would it be? In the preface of the book, and Michael was reminding me this yesterday night, there's a fiction book author, novel author, who knows the story and who knows those guys saying, what would be his motive? Let's pretend it's a hoax. First, you have to build that bloody hoax. Maybe over centuries. You have to create those smart boxes. Donru is an old guy. Maybe he created all this. Maybe he made that up. But then, what's the motive, says that person in the preface, in the introduction to the book. What's his motive? You never see him on TV. He's not looking for fame. He's not looking for glory. He's fleeing away from cameras, from the show. If he wanted to be famous, he would have given everything to the show saying, put me forward, make me shine. That didn't happen. Money? How many copies of Scrolls of Wolter were sold? 1,000? 2,000? You don't make a living out of this. It's not about money. So at the same time, all this is so extraordinary. You tend to say it's a hoax. It's made up. Nothing's real. But at the same time, making a hoax to that dimension, that's a heck of an endeavor. So maybe it's true. Maybe. Yeah, again, this is again the type of, I showed you that picture earlier, but I didn't show you the comment. I cropped them on purpose. On this one, so Don received this from Dane Ryan's wife, Opus 40 brochure, picture of Dane Ryan and the roughly 1600 symbol table with an encrypted message copied by CLY. You see him here? Again. He opened the plaque with Scott Wolter and Janet Wolter on 3rd of May. Yeah. According to the books, Don was opening all those treasure boxes or secret messages or crypted messages with cameras running and people, testimony, witnesses. And in many cases, Scott, because Don didn't want to, he wanted to make it authentic. Was he even too cautious and it sounds suspicious? I don't know, but that's what he did. And here on this side, blah, 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 the most recent of all encrypted message and signed Talaco 2. The message was dated to 1965, and most recent of all encrypted message from the criminal document, and it's signed Talaco 2. We suspect this is the grandson of Cliffus Lucinus Isarbo, who signed his name at the end of the Sakandaka Lake as CLY and Talaco. Mind you, I don't think Scott and Don Rue, I don't think, but I don't know about this. That there's a CLY that's been written, the same writing than the Zina Halpern's map on the War of the Book of the Lord, which seems to be from 1908. 1908, the date we found earlier. Anyways, that's a lot for today. Oh yeah, that last one. Oh my gosh, you're going to love this. And that's going to be the end for today. This is the end of the book. Once the 13th section were placed in a proper numerical order, blah, 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 a message came up in 1898. I saw the light, could it be, blah, 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 blah. A few garments of their light, the old one of Octa only, blue eyes embraced me, and together we walked to the lodge, so has passed the scroll of the war of the Lord from the world of men, known by the sigil of my ancestor. All I write is true. Talaco, which seems to mean gray eagle, CLY. Talaco, CLY. Gray eagle, CLY. That's interesting. Now we're mixing the two signatures. CLY is Talaco, but not Talaco 2 and not CLY 17. Because now we're in 1898, so another generation of CLY, another generation of Talaco. Could it be that those guardians, 13th generation, use pseudonyms? Because how are you going to tell your great-great-great-great-son about doing something on the island? You have to leave documents behind you if it's 13th generation information going through 13th generation. You need to have documents, but you don't want somebody mistakenly finding them and understanding everything. So you code them, you crypt them, but you crypt them for your own family, so you get them keys so that your great-great-great-grandson will be able to find La Formule, the oak tree, and etc. So maybe that's some of the clans that were keeping the information and were guarding the place. Now this is Scott Wolter. It seems one of the secrets of the Book of the War of the Lord is the undeniable mention of extraterrestrials, as we see here, and in the messages to come. This is startling and begs the question as to whether the extraterrestrials had anything to do with the treasure buried on Oak Island, and so far there's no indication that they did. Say, okay, so why do you write those letters and words and sentences if there's no indication they did? I didn't pay attention to that blackened section. It's one of my French viewers who made the comments like, hey, you mentioned it yourself. Auchanland and Rennes-le-Château, where the story began. And you're gonna see in Michael's next video, there's a strong connection. All right, I'll let you sleep on this one. The last part is Scott Wolters. I don't endorse anything. I'm just the messenger. Please don't make comments on the chat saying I ruined the game. I'm just explaining the content of a book. My opinion, you don't know about all this, but we'll talk about later. Merci beaucoup, all my English-speaking viewers, and talk to you very soon. You have a very good day. Bye bye.